You're at a George P. Shultz lecture series, and I want to publicly thank one of America's greatest statesmen, politicians, and Marines, George P. Shultz, for sponsoring this lecture series. Our speaker tonight is the Surgeon General of the Navy, and he's going to talk about military medicine and the amazing things they're doing. My job is to introduce Secretary Shultz.
You've done that, so
What an easy job I have. Ladies and gentlemen, former Secretary of State George P. Shultz. Give him a big hand.
Okay, so we have a real treat for us here this evening. And we have Admiral Nathan, and he is terrific. He spoke at Fleet Week and blew everybody away. And I've had the privilege of seeing him on a few other occasions, including earlier today. And this guy really knows his stuff. I mean, you have a good mind that's well trained, and then you subject that mind to a lot of experience. You have his bio that's passed out, but it's incomplete. I'm shocked, Mike, that you would have an incomplete bio, because it doesn't say that he's a graduate of the Napa High School. And I understand that he played a little music in a local town nearby, and this afternoon I learned he also worked at a car wash. So he's one of our guys, right here, local guy. And he got training down in Georgia somehow or other, and in part in conjunction with the VA. I was interesting to learn, part of a program that Mike put on this afternoon, how high a proportion of people trained in medicine do that in some form of affiliation with the Veterans Administration. It's really quite impressive. But anyway, he did that. His first assignment after he graduated was in the Navy, was at Guantanamo Bay, of all places. But he served on the East Coast, he served on the West Coast. He's been in London, he's been in Tokyo, he served aboard ship. So he has the experience to lead the medical work for the Navy and Marine Corps. Now, there's a little magazine that they put out that I happened to pick up today, and this is a map, and it shows all the different places where the Navy has locations all over the United States and some abroad, but that's really not the point. The point is that the Navy and Marine Corps are the forward deployed armed forces. We're out there on the sea, in landings. And so, with all of the importance, of course, of these shore-based pieces of medicine, it's the warfighting medicine, the people who are forward deployed and fighting our battles that are central. And at least as far as I can make out, it's simply astonishing how much better our medical efforts are for our guys out there who get wounded, to bring them back. And that's all due for many reasons, but one of them has to do with Navy medicine. So I consider it a great honor and privilege to have a chance to introduce to our great group here in San Francisco, the Surgeon General of the Navy.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be here. Secretary Perry, Admiral Oliver, Mr. Tyson, distinguished flag officers, guests, Marines, friends of Navy and Marine Corps, the military, and just those interested in seeing what's new and what's happening in a major section of what we do in the military today. I hope tonight to give you some informative things you didn't know about military medicine, about Navy Marine Corps medicine. On behalf of the Chief of Naval Operations, on behalf of the Commandant of the Marine Corps, my bosses, I bring their greetings and I bring their thanks for your interest in what we do, and always in your advocacy and your support of what we do. I can tell, being back here, I'm not in DC anymore. Politicians are hugging each other, people are friendly. People are, saying nice things. There aren't a whole lot of four-letter words. And I'll go back to DC, and the terror will start again as we deal through sequestration and the budget, which is another challenge which is looming on the horizon. But I did grow up in this area. I went to Napa High School. It got very big. It split up into Vintage High School, the second high school in Napa. The colors that Vintage High School were, anybody guess? What were our two colors? Burgundy and Chablis. And the mascot at Vintage High School was the Crusher, big guy crushing grapes. And our football cheerleaders would get out there and go, crush them, stomp them, squeeze all the juice. Send them back where they were. Anyway, I digress. It's great to be back in the Bay Area. So if I could leave you with one concept, and this is old news to many of my shipmates here, past and present, we are the away team. The United States Navy's job is to be away from home. Our job is to be there on scene. My old boss at 7th Fleet, which is based out of Yokosuka, Japan, used to say when people asked him, what do you do? He'd say, I'm in the readiness business. My job is to be available and to be ready for anything, anytime, and put the fire out while it's small before it gets big. Be it a carrier in the Straits of Taiwan, in the Persian Gulf, be it a amphibious unit with a battalion of Marines embarked on an amphibious ship somewhere around the European or African or Mediterranean peninsulas. It doesn't matter, but this is just a quick snapshot of all the places we are. So I am charged with providing care to an amazing group of individuals, not the least of which, and I said this earlier today, when I'm asked about the advantages of Navy medicine over any other service, and I certainly welcome and am humbled by any of our fellow service members here from the Air Force or the Army or the Coast Guard, it is a team sport. And nothing has shown that team sport more than 11 years of combat, linking arms together, bleeding together, and serving together. It is a team sport. That said, I'm a little bit parochial about my services, about my sailors and my Marines. And one of the great advantages of being a Navy medical officer is I get to support the Marine Corps. I am charged with the care of the Marine Corps. The Marines are an interesting organization. Can I get an hoorah? So young Matt Nathan, Lieutenant Nathan, battalion surgeon for 2-9 down out of Camp Pendleton. We're getting ready to go down to do a hot op. This is when President Reagan, sir, was in office, and we were doing a little mixing it up down there in Nicaragua and things we couldn't talk about at the time, and hopefully the statute of limitations is worn off and we can talk about it now. But I was down there and we were getting ready to go in, and the Marine Corps major said to me, he said, hey Doc, where's your weapon? I said, oh, I'll get one, sir, I haven't checked it out yet. He goes, come here. He grabs me by the ear, drags me over to the armory. And he says, Doc needs a weapon. And the corporal's in the armory. Now, the major's smoking in the armory. There's explosives all around, everything else, hardcore Marine. And the corporal pushes a 45 across. This is dating myself because they use 9 mils mostly now, but he pushed a 45 across, and I went to grab it, and the major grabbed the gun, and he, said, Doc needs some ammo. Pushed a couple of clips over, and I went to grab the clips, and he slapped my hand away, and he grabbed one clip and threw it back. He said, you don't need that. Grabbed the other clip, started flicking all the rounds out of it. Left one round in it, put it in, gave me the weapon. I said, hey, Major. He goes, yeah, Doc. I said, there's only one bullet in my gun. He goes, well, first of all, Doc, we don't call it a gun. it's a weapon, it's a sidearm, or maybe a pistol. Second of all, we don't call them bullets. It's a round. You've only got one round in your gun. And I said, but why only? He says, Doc, here's the way I figure it. If we get in a situation down there where you need to draw your weapon, just shoot yourself in the foot. They started calling me Barney Fife because I only had one bullet. So I went outside, and the dentist was there, the dental corps officer, and he said, hey, Matt, where'd you get your gun? I said, first of all, we don't call it a gun. But I have had the privilege and the honor of serving with Marines. Young Marines in this room who step out in front and say, nothing will harm you while I have the watch. Marines like Secretary Shultz, who stepped out in front during the Second World War and said, nothing will harm you while I have the watch. So we take care of the Marines as well. Next, please. So this is just a little vignette about where we are and what we do. So what I would impress upon you is that many of the people you saw in that video, and that we'll talk about for the next few minutes, which include medics, corpsmen, doctors, nurses, dentists, medical service corps officers. You saw them in scenes at sea, you saw them in scenes in battle, you've imagined and heard the stories of some of them working under the most horrendous conditions, showing the best and the worst of what humanity has to bring to the game. But they don't stay there forever. They migrate through a system, an enterprise of healthcare that consists of medical centers, tertiary care medical centers, medical hospitals, medium-sized community hospitals, clinics, and they migrate back and forth. So the doctor that you may see in a military Navy hospital today, or the corpsman who's taking your blood pressure or drawing your blood or giving you advice on nutrition or on exercises, may well be suited up and in the AOR, in the area of responsibility, tomorrow. It's what we do. It is the organization that I work for where we have to maintain a constant migration and equilibrium of personnel who migrate back and forth from our fixed care facilities, such as might be at a base, to the war. And if they're not at war, they have to be preparing for it. Because my job, our job, is to make sure that when the bell rings, we're there to answer it. Be it kinetic combat warfare, be it humanitarian assistance, a tsunami, an earthquake, a hurricane. Internationally, be it Indonesia, be it Haiti, be it nationally, be it New Orleans and Katrina, be it the eastern seaboard with snowstorm and a hurricane, or heaven forbid, be it the West Coast, my home port here in the Bay Area, from a large earthquake. Those are the things we have to be ready to meet, and we're not allowed to say, you know what, we're not ready. Our job is to be in the readiness business. So I have about 63,000 people, and we have several medical centers, and we take care of the kinetic combat areas, as well as all the families and the retirees who've left a legacy for us to follow. And the last thing we bring, or not the last but not least thing we bring to it, is global engagement. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more. Navy medicine, Navy Marine Corps medicine, is probably best suited for globally engaging, breaking down barriers, breaking the ice between other nations, other cultures. Medicine has always been a great icebreaker. When I went to Eastern Europe shortly after the Iron Curtain fell, Secretary Shultz was instrumental as Secretary of State in brokering our policies that led to that. So the Iron Curtain comes down, and I go, a Navy lieutenant commander, in my Navy uniform, to Eastern Europe, to countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Latvia, that had formerly been under the Soviet bloc, to show goodwill, to bring training, to bring our cultural ethos to these countries. I ran into a very senior Soviet, former Soviet, medical officer, very senior. And we were talking about differences, and he came up to me and he said, in sort of the Russian accent, he said, "Do you know why your soldiers fight so hard?" And I said, "Well, I believe so. We have a Constitution and a Declaration of Independence. We believe in the pursuit of life and liberty." He goes, "Nah, that has nothing to do with it." He said, "They fight so hard because you maintain a medical system. You maintain a care continuum. You guarantee their families that you will provide everything it takes to get them well and keep them healthy and keep them alive." Now, the next thing he said was, I could say it's not for attribution, but I've got 4 cameras on me. But the next thing he said was, you know, in my country, in your country, when somebody goes down in the battlefield, they feel hands on them from your people, taking care of them and checking them and stopping bleeding. He says, in my country, when they went down on the battlefield, they felt hands on them, but it might be taking their boots off. It might be taking their equipment. He said, that's a huge difference. We were able to connect and talk about what we could learn from each other because we broke the medical ice. So global engagement is an important part of what we do. Being there matters. I often tell our young corpsmen, many of whom are asked to punch way above their weight, these 18 to 22-year-olds who go into battle and see things. You know, you look at and again, I'm encouraged by America's youth today. I have a daughter, she's 15 years old, and I'm excited about her future when I see her and her friends and what they bring. But we ask these kids to go into battle, as we do the young Marines themselves and the young sailors themselves. We ask them to do things that are almost inhuman in their ability to withstand and contend in that environment. And we'll talk a little bit more about the potential consequences of that and what it means to you here in San Francisco, what it means to major cities in the country as this war ebbs, as people come home. But being there matters. This is a picture. We make some pretty cool house calls in the Navy. We're one of the few organizations that still makes house calls. This was a young gal, 13-year-old, who had a burst appendix on a cruise ship off of Baja, California. There was no time to get her back to the States. She would have probably died of peritonitis. Ronald Reagan was in town, gave it a hard order to turn hard to port. The aircraft carrier turned left. About 8 hours, got next to the cruise ship. We medevacked her on board. Our surgeon on the Reagan took her appendix out, cleaned her up, and saved her life. Last I heard, she's still trying to join the Navy. So now that's a cool mission, and we love doing those, and those are great for public relations, but that's not why we exist. Next slide, please. We exist to be out here, on the point of the spear, walking hand in hand with the sailor, the Marine, the soldier, the airman, the coastie, those people who are putting their lives on the line. We exist so that if you have a loved one or a cherished friend that you know of, you have a son or a daughter, or a sister or a brother, or you've had a mother or a father, or a cherished friend who's gone to battle, that you go to bed at night worried about them. You should be. It's dangerous business. It's a dangerous business. But you're a little less worried that if they get hurt, there'll be something there to bring as much medical firepower to the game as possible to give them the best fighting chance of recovering from their visible and their invisible injuries. That's why we exist. That's our raison d'etre. And that person ends up in one of our combat casualty forward resuscitative surgical stations. So if you get hurt, blown up, blown to smithereens, and the war has changed from Iraq to Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the majority of the injuries were single amputations when an amputation occurred, either from a rocket-propelled grenade into a transport vehicle or a sniper shot while you were riding on a vehicle. Afghanistan is a different terrain. It requires dismounted, the Marines know exactly what I'm talking about, requires dismounted patrols, requires getting out of your vehicle and having to walk the footpaths. And so when you get hit by an IED in Afghanistan, chances are you're on foot when it happens. And so the amputations that occur there are usually not generally single. They're usually multiple. And it has changed the paradigm of what's happened. And so, but that said, if you reach a forward resuscitative surgical station alive because of the treatment that the corpsman or the medic provided you en route at the battle scene, using advanced techniques, tourniquet therapy, quick clotting therapy, therapy that will save your or my life on the freeway on 80. 5 years from now, if you or I are involved in a horrendous accident, or 2 years from now, in a horrendous accident, and we're hemorrhaging and we're bleeding, the changes we've learned and developed on the battlefield have been imported and will be imported here, and UCSF or Kaiser or any other trauma center will save your life because of what we've learned on the battlefield. So, we take you to the forward resuscitative station. If you arrive alive, you have a 98.5% chance of remaining alive. That's unheard of. That isn't just a slight incremental change over World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam. That is an echelon of change. You have nearly a 99% chance of staying alive and returning to the States alive if you arrive alive at one of these forward resuscitative stations. And much of that is not due, give the surgeons their credit. They do some amazing battlefield surgery, but that is due to our young corpsmen. That is due to our Marines taking care of each other. That is due to the advanced techniques we've learned in the platinum 15 minutes, in the golden hour of care. That's the difference it's made. Here's the other difference. Next slide, please. Remember, these same people who are working, and this happens to be an operating room of a hospital ship, but these same doctors who are working there, 6 months from now, will come back from there. They'll be working in our hospitals. They'll be doing the routine surgery. They'll be doing colorectal surgery, gallbladders, hernia repairs, those sorts of things. So my job is to keep their skills proficient. My job is to keep them mentally refreshed. My job is to keep them leaning forward so that when the bell rings, they can be ready to answer the call. My challenge right now, ladies and gentlemen, is not to keep a reservoir of knowledge of combat casualty care and trauma. It's as good as it's ever been in the history of our country. Our military trauma and combat casualty nurses and medics and dentists and doctors and corpsmen is as good as it's ever been. My challenge is going to be to maintain that so we don't lose that capability. We don't lose that reservoir of knowledge as the war ebbs. There's nothing I'd like more than to wake up tomorrow morning and be out of a job. My boss, the Chief of Naval Operations, says he's willing to make that happen sooner than later. But I'd love to wake up tomorrow morning and find that there is no war, there is no hostility, there is no combat trauma, there is no illness, there is no disease, and I'm no longer needed. As a physician, that would be the ideal for me. Unfortunately, business has been good and probably will stay good for a while. But that said, these are amazing folks, And this young man would not have survived in Vietnam. This young man would not have survived in Korea, World War I or World War II. He has survived, and he'll be rehabilitated. He'll be at the hospital. In this particular case, he was taken to the hospital I commanded before this assignment, Walter Reed Bethesda. For those of you who follow Army or Navy medicine, there used to be the National Naval Medical Center at Bethesda, a Navy hospital, took care of the president, still does, run by the Navy, and there used to be Walter Reed, that other hospital. And now, under my tenure, we merged them. We're now one big hospital. They all moved over to Bethesda. It's the United States Army, the greatest army in the world, that's paid with tremendous blood and treasure, and they are an amazing army. An army that's occupied Valley Forge, Seoul, Tokyo, Berlin, Da Nang, now occupies Bethesda, Maryland, at the National Naval Medical Hospital. And so we're learning to bring the synergy. But this young Marine will be rehabilitated. Another change from the time of Secretary Shultz. If you were badly injured, grievously injured, in World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, the average time you were medevaced back to the States, from the time you got on a transport ship or an aircraft to take you back to the States, was 45 to 60 days. You stayed in theater from anywhere between a month and a half to 2 months before you got back home. That gave your family a month and a half to 2 months on average to adjust and prepare themselves for your injuries. The average time right now, if a young man is or a young woman is in the Helmand province right now as we speak in Afghanistan and gets blown up and loses 2 legs, they'll be back in my ICU in Bethesda in 3 days. The family will have just probably 2 days to reconcile themselves to the injury. We will immediately fly that family back to Bethesda. Sometimes we'll fly the family to Landstuhl, Germany, the next day. The family will show up with no suitcase, no clothes, no nothing. We'll just wire them, we'll arrange their transportation, we'll get them there, because we have learned the most healing factor for a young person who has been physically and catastrophically injured is loved ones next to them. It is the best chicken soup in the world. And when they don't have a family, and as you know, many people who enter the military don't, because sometimes they're running away from their family. And when they don't have a family, or they have a dysfunctional family, we become their family. You become their family. We are their family. As I tell my young corpsmen, you can't always be the cure. You can't always be the savior. But you can be there. You can be there. And nobody exemplifies that more than the United States Marine, more than the United States sailor, more than the soldier, more than the airman. So he'll go on to rehab. You look at that picture, what's the first thing you see? A family walking out of a hospital. You take a little closer look, and what do you see? Dad's got 1 leg missing, 1 arm missing. But outside of that, that little girl doesn't know any different. All she knows is Daddy's back and swinging her as they walk out of the hospital. Mommy's holding 1 hand, Daddy's got the other, little sis is in the other hand. I think I've told this story before, Mr. Secretary, but it left an indelible impression on me. So when I was the commander at Walter Reed Bethesda, and I would walk around the ward to welcome new families in and try to ease the shock and try to let them know they were in the best place, and they were. There is no better, unfortunately, and I say that because of the practice we've had and the experience we've gained, but there is no better place for combat trauma, catastrophic wounds, than a place like that. And I tell families whose sons and daughters come in grievously injured, if your loved one has a chance anywhere, they have that chance here. And I would walk around usually a day or 2 after they'd be admitted, because a lot of times they'd be groggy and they'd wake up, and 24 hours later they'd sort of figure out where they were. They weren't in Afghanistan, they'd woke up, and here they are in Bethesda. Or Brooke Army in San Antonio. Or San Diego, the 3 trauma areas. Anyway, I was making calls on the families, and I walked into this one Marine Corps Lance Corporal. He had lost 1 leg from the knee down, and he'd lost part of his hand. He would eventually go on to lose the rest of his hand. And as we had done, we flew his wife and his little boy in. The little boy was probably 6 years old. Now, his little boy had been told when Daddy went off to war about 3 months previously that was going to be tough, but the good news was that when Daddy came back, which was supposed to be that next summer, they would all go to Disney World. So I come in, and Dad's waking up. He's got a bandage on the missing leg in his hand, and we're controlling the pain, and his wife is there, and his little boy's there, because we have all those things set up at the compound to take care of the family. And while I'm there talking to them, saying, hey, you're in great shape, it's going to be fine, his little boy says, Daddy, are we still going to get to go to Disney World? And his mom teared up. The Marine teared up. The little boy didn't know what was going on, so he teared up. But I didn't tear up because I've been doing this for a while. And I said, when are you supposed to go? In about 9 months from now? He goes, yes, sir, about 9 months from now. I looked at the little boy, I said, not only will your daddy take you to Disney World in 9 months, but he will get on every ride with you. The little boy brightened up, and Mom brightened up, and the Marine went like this to me. And I bent over him, and I said, Marine, I'm not making this up. I said, we can get you on a leg, get you on a prosthetic leg, and get you probably running by that time. He said, sir, it's not that. I didn't like those rides when I had both legs. So this is why we do it. So I made that promise to that little boy, and we kept it, by the way. We kept it. Next slide, please. I can't make that promise to those people who have had the invisible injuries of war. Traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. And this is where you as a civic community, this is where you as an organization of caregivers, marquee organizations, like the UC system, like the Kaiser system, like the private system, need to get very interested. I can't make that same promise to the family whose soldier or Marine or sailor has come back with moderate to severe TBI or post-traumatic stress. Because I can't guarantee in 8 months or 9 months that they'll be back on top of their game, ready to laugh and enjoy Disney World or Disneyland or the beach. It is our most vexing challenge. And you've heard the president. We have somewhere between 30 and 40,000 folks coming home over the next year. You put on top of that the planned not sequestration, but the planned drawdown of 80,000 soldiers over the next 5 to 10 years and 20,000 Marines over the next 5 to 10 years. And you have a tsunami of people coming back to reintegrate in society who are going to need our help, need our support. Not all of them will, but out of the 2 million members of the armed forces over the last 11 years who have rotated to Iraq and Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands will be affected. And how will they not be a drain on the civic and the social organizations unless we take care of them, unless we make a difference, unless we lean in together? We can't do it alone in the Department of Defense. We can't do it alone in the VA. The VA is doing everything they can to handle this. This is going to be a collaborative effort between the private sector, the academic sector, the VA, and the DoD. Next slide, please. So when you think of Navy medicine, you think of this is Bethesda, this is the President's Hospital. Every president since Roosevelt got their care there. President Roosevelt, by the way, was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He had been in Nebraska, saw the State House, liked it, went out to Bethesda, saw a big grassy area there, and he drew a picture on the back of an envelope, gave it to his architect, and said, build me this hospital. And they did it. Those were the days when presidents could say something would happen and it would actually happen. But we're so much more than that. So Navy medicine has research facilities all over the world, as well as our global engagement. We have a research facility in Cairo, Egypt. It's been there since the 40s. It has never, since 1940, ever had to relocate, evacuate, or cease business. even in the last few years over the Arab Spring, it's been intact because it's globally engaged, because it makes a difference, because the people in that country recognize that our command, and it is a military command with a commanding officer and an XO in the middle of Cairo, is there to do good, is there to learn about illness, learn about disease. #1 infectious disease killer in all the world. More people died of it today than any other infectious disease. What is it? Malaria. Malaria. And we're there looking for vaccines. We're looking for changes. A lab worker in Cairo. And they're not just in Cairo. They're all over Africa. They're all over the Middle East, doing good stuff, engaging, showing American compassion, American ethos, the American desire to try to be part of the greater world citizenship. The motto of the United States Navy, not Navy medicine, the United States Navy is a global force for good. We want to build. We want to make better. We want to be like the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts who are taught when you go to a campsite, leave it looking better when you leave it than when you got there. We want the world to be a better place when we leave it than when we got there. Here we are in the Amazon, where you can see a bunch of sailors sitting in a boat. Obviously, we're not positioned correctly. We're taking water in over the stern. This was on a recent trip. I was with the group. We're in the Amazon, sailing down the Amazon, stopping house by house, village by village, checking people for malaria, for dengue, for encephalitis. This is the kind of cultural integration, cultural engagement that makes a difference. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. South America is a breeding ground for terrorism, as is Africa, as are so many other regions in the world. And so Navy medicine is out there partnering with the Marine Corps, trying to do these operations to show that we can bring the firepower when we have to. The United States Navy and Marine Corps can bring the heat. You don't want them to bring the heat. We're pretty good at it. It's your worst day if we decide that we don't like you. But we'd rather bring the light. We'd rather bring something that changes your life. We'd rather bring a doctor who can fix a cleft palate so that young child in that village who before was ostracized and was treated as a second-class citizen is now growing older and telling everybody about what the Americans did. Hospital ship to comfort. We have the sister one down here in San Diego, the Mercy. They're amazing platforms of engagement. They're amazing platforms of peace. So you're a country like Haiti. You have low infrastructure to begin with. Or let's back up the tape even, Indonesia. You're Indonesia, and you're the most populated Muslim country in the world, and you're predominantly anti-American. Why are you anti-American? Because you've heard so many bad things about the Americans. You've been told so many lies, you don't know any better, so you think the Americans are bad people. And you have a tsunami. You have a tsunami that basically just erases a third of your country. And so we send the Lincoln Battle Group and we send the Mercy over to Indonesia. And without firing a shot, we reverse the sentiment in that country. And all of a sudden, that country which hated us now likes us and is willing to learn a little more about us. That's global engagement. You're a country like Haiti. You don't have an infrastructure to begin with. Your hospitals are weak to begin with. An earthquake comes and knocks it all down. Knocks down the places you would go to get help. It's bad enough if something knocks down your homes and your businesses, but imagine if it knocks down the hospitals where you would go to get help. And your people initially are crushed. They're not sick with disease at this point. They are not dehydrated or starving at this point. They have been crushed. They need surgery. They need shock control. They need operative care. All your ORs have been destroyed. There is no hope. You cannot fly ORs in to a country. What do you do? Next slide, please.
I know I'm not going to be able to treat everybody for everything. I just knew I had to give everything I had to everybody who was on the ship.
We're going to go to our neighbors around the world and show them that we have compassion.
We take care of people who have so little.
You can put this ship off the coast anywhere, and it is a symbol of we're here to help, We're also here to learn as much from your country as you can from us.
If you were to take John Hopkins or Walter Reed and put it inside the skin of a ship, that's what we have.
We have digital x-ray, we have dental, we have optometry,
We have a CAT scan machine.
12 operating rooms, as well as an interventional radiology suite,
We have our own oxygen plant that produces medical oxygen.
80 ICU beds, and hundreds of ward beds.
So anything you could do at a Navy or civilian hospital, we can do it here. The only difference is we can come to you instead of you having to come to us.
Operation Continuing Promise is actually a regular deployment schedule where we take the USNS Comfort to Central and South America. The countries vary a little bit.
We work with the ministries of health to be able to build a partnership of caring, a partnership of learning and education.
We made a promise to these countries that we visited that in any time that they're going to have a need for us to come down and help them, that we would be back.
I was driving home from work, and as I was driving, I started hearing about the earthquake.
And I told my wife, I said, well, I've got to get my sea bag ready because I'm going to be getting a phone call tomorrow. We're going to go down to Haiti probably by the end of the week.
I really felt that this is what I've been preparing my entire life for.
For Operation Unified Response, the ship was underway in 76 hours.
On the way down to Haiti, we kept receiving a lot of information via email about hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people, primarily with orthopedic injuries. But it's one thing to see a couple of pictures on the internet, another thing to know that you're actually going to be a part of the human element of what we see, the devastation. The fact that that suffering was going to be coming on board in numbers that we had no idea of how many or for how long.
When we're about 100 miles out, we started getting patients. We went nonstop the first 3 days.
About every 90 seconds, those elevator doors open, and here come more and more patients, and they just kept coming. Then there would be about a 20-minute delay, the next round of helicopters, and there would be more and more coming.
Anywhere from newborns that didn't have any family left up to, senior citizens.
So it was kind of like a mayhem, because you've got two different cultures, you've got different types of understanding of the disease process.
So each and every patient that would come in, I would spend some time with an interpreter to understand their story, because everyone seemed to be, the next one seemed to be worse than the previous one. You couldn't make this stuff up. We had an individual who was approximately 28 years old, and he had a very bad injury right over his elbow on his dominant arm. Basically, it took out the joint itself. Now, the interesting thing with him was this part worked just fine. So he knew that he was probably going to have an amputation. But in talking to him, he has a family, he has dreams for his kids. So I was with my colleague, a hand surgeon, Dr. Rulin, and we looked and we saw that he may not have an elbow, but what about if we just connect the bones up? If we can get the bones to heal, he won't have any motion across the elbow, or what was the elbow, but he'll still have the use of his hand. We took him back after the surgery into the recovery room. The first thing he did when he woke up is he kind of looked down to see if he had a hand. He saw his hand, he grabbed it just like he did before, picked it up. It works, it works.
I think in the big picture, the big scheme of things, having the Comfort and the Mercy shows the rest of the world that we're not just out there to go, drop bombs in the desert and fight wars. We can project a positive image and soft power on the rest of the country, rest of the world, and maybe change some people's opinions about us.
We are military, but we're in a big white ship. As a matter of fact, many places we go, when they see us off the coast, they call us the Great White Angel from America. Every site, hundreds and hundreds of surgeries, lives that are changed, and impressions that are altered for the benefit of the United States of America and our partner and host nations as well.
From a humanitarian assistance perspective, there's not anything more rewarding that you can do truly in the Navy.
These are your folks. This is the America's Away team. This is what we do. This is what we're honored and proud to do. We are so honored and proud to work with amazing healthcare organizations here, around the world, partner, find new and innovative ways. We learn so much from each other when we do this. We give back when we can. We learn when we can. We just want to make a difference. We want to make you proud of your Navy and your Marine Corps. We want every Marine to continue to feel they will not take a hill without sight of their corpsman. We want our corpsmen to remain the most valored and decorated rating in the Navy. And we have walked the walk. As I said today, of all the Navy forces deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq over the last 11 years, over 50% of all Navy, all rates, all ranks, all types, over 50% of those wounded in action have been from Navy medicine. And over 1/3 of those killed in action have been from Navy medicine. It's the credo that we live by. It is what is humbling and honored at the same time. It is that ethos that says to the Marine, to the soldier, to the sailor, to the airman, to their families, to their loved ones, we'll step out in front of you. And if illness or disease or injury or death wants to get to you, they'll have to go through me first. We say that to the Marine in Afghanistan. We say that to the Indonesian at the tsunami. We say that to the Haitian in the earthquake. And if we need to, we'll say it to you here if tragedy or catastrophe strikes. Our pledge to you is to be ready, and more than anything else, to be there. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your advocacy. It's my pleasure, my honor to talk to you tonight. Thank you very much.
So we've got a few minutes for questions, and that's a very positive message. I've got some questions that are concerned about some negatives. What will be the impact of sequestration on Navy medicine?
It's a very timely question. Interestingly enough, today I was called by the Chief of Naval Operations who asked me the same thing, because I believe he's testifying in the next few days. Bottom line is the care to the forward deployed sailor or Marine will not change. We're not going to be taxed to the point where we're going to be hampered in any way to care for somebody who is deployed at sea. In our research facilities, we have research facilities in Peru, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Cairo, all our ships at sea. That said, I'm going to have to mobilize some forces because I'll be cut back. I'm going to have to mobilize some forces from the rear to the front to maintain that covenant that I have with those forward deployed folks. So it may change my availability and accessibility of routine care in my military hospitals in the States here, which may mean that I may have to send some people out of my hospitals to the private sector. I don't want to do that, not because I don't like the private sector, but I'm paying for the care twice. So what I've told Congress is if you cut me back to the point where I have to send some patients from Bethesda or San Diego or Beaufort or Jacksonville out to the private sector, you'll save money in the short run, but in the long run, you'll end up paying for that care twice. So that is the biggest fear. There is a potential fear for those of you in the audience who are TRICARE beneficiaries. You're wondering, well, I get my care on the outside already. TRICARE pays for it. What's going to happen to that? I'll go on record with what the Comptroller of the Department of Defense has gone on record with, Secretary Hale, and I'll simply say that if sequestration happens as badly as it could, we're not sure where the money's going to come from in the fourth quarter, meaning this coming summer, fall, to pay for any health care on the outside. I don't envision a scenario that bad, mainly because it would be politically untenable. And the politics, I think, will drive it the other way. But the bottom line is no son or daughter who's deployed or forward deployed or at the field of combat will be affected by this. But it may affect my ability to provide elective care in my hospitals.
Sir, what do you say to individuals that believe all military medicine should be joint? In other words, we should have a DOD system and not an Air Force, Army, or Navy medical system?
So Navy medicine, under my guide at least, our strategic plan is very simple. Our strategic message. It's readiness, value, and joint. Those three things. I need every sailor I go to at any one of my facilities, be it in Afghanistan or be it in San Diego, to tell me when I say, what's our most important things? They'll say readiness, value, and joint. Readiness. I just went through a whole litany of things why we have to be ready. That's the difference. Value. I need every care provider we have questioning if what we're giving is best value. Value is quality times capability divided by cost. And the last is joint. People say, why joint? Because we're going to be more and more joint. I just told you how Walter Reed and Bethesda, two icons of culture, who 20 years ago, no general or no admiral would have ever said, oh, I see them coexisting in the same roof together. Yet today they do. Today they are one medical facility. We are creating a defense health agency in Washington, D.C. that will start to share services and start provide common services. I can't defend the present system. I can't defend having Army medicine do things one way and Navy medicine do it another. Mr. Tyson and I were having this conversation today. How do you have different practices at any different facility? There should be one best practice. And that's what you should strive for, to have at all your facilities. So in that way, joint is good. That said, there is a little bit of difference between providing medicine on a ship or a submarine than there is on an aircraft at 40,000 feet or in a tank. And there's going to be inherent differences in how we do this and how we practice. So I will always have parts of my organization that are maritime-centric and maritime-specific. The good news is the Army has no desire to practice medicine at sea. Just the thought of a 4-degree roll at sea makes them green, although they like being green. The Air Force, my father was in the Air Force, so I pick on them relentlessly. You know, the Navy cheer is hoo-yah, the Army is hoo-ah, the Marine Corps is hoorah, and the Air Force is for. They play a lot of golf in the Air Force. Like I said, my dad was in the Air Force, so I can get away with that. My point is, I think some service parochialism is good for our organization. I think it creates diversity, competitiveness. It creates a different approach to things where we learn and share those. That said, the days of having a completely disjointed military health service are over. We have got to find commonalities. We cannot have redundancies. We cannot have inefficiencies in our organization. So part of my challenge is to lead change in a very changing organization.
So the next question, how does military medicine stay abreast of developments, for example, in Silicon Valley?
So we have a very robust informatics and information technology section. My M6 is the head of that. We work part and parcel with the military health system, M6, the CIO of the military. We are constantly on the cutting edge and looking for, and to steal with rat-like cunning, anything that makes a better mousetrap for us. We recognize in military medicine, especially in the maritime forces, where I am charged with the provision of care at sea, in an environment where Mr. and Mrs. America is unforgiving of any inadequacy of health care in any environment of the world. Would you expect any less? If you sent your son or daughter to sea and they were on an aircraft carrier or destroyer somewhere in the South China Sea and they had chest pain and had a heart attack and I told you, you know, it's just hard at sea. We kind of give up on chest pain. Too bad for them, they were at sea. They should have been at Bethesda. Would you accept that? I won't accept that. So we're looking at ways we can leverage what Kaiser's learned, what the VA has learned, what Hopkins has learned, what Stanford has learned. We have more telemedicine now capability than we ever had in the past. We need it because our ships are getting smaller with less medical personnel, leveraging more technology. Admiral Oliver understands this. Any seagoing leader understands this. We started with big battleships which had crews of 2,000, 3,000 people on them with big 16-inch guns. Then we got down to destroyers and cruisers, which have way more firepower than a battleship, much more combat capability, with crews of 300 to 400 people on them, small medical department. Now we have the littoral combat ship, and depending on how you deck it out, can have almost as much firepower as a destroyer. Crew size on an LCS, 50. Pretty soon we'll have one guy in an inner tube and a bazooka off the coast. But it'll be a powerful bazooka. There's no room for a medical person on that ship or that LCS. That crew size that small. What if somebody falls down sick? What if somebody gets pneumonia? What if they bank their head? I've now got CT scanners on my large amphibious ships at sea. Admiral Oliver and others know this. Worst thing can happen to you when you're out in the middle of the ocean is you get somebody calls you and says, sailor just got knocked out, took a heavy roll, something fell off a deck, hit him, knocked him out, he's got a concussion. And you say, well, Doc, what do you think? And the doc on the ship says, sir, he's either kind of knocked out and he'll wake up in a day or two or he'll be dead. What do I do? Sir, if it were me, I'd turn the ship around. Well, that's going to cost me $3 million if I turn the ship around. Well, sir, I don't know what else to tell you. If I had a CT scanner, I could tell you if he had a bleed or not. So we put CT scanners out there that automatically read these things. We put psychologists now on aircraft carriers. We embed mental health professionals out there. We're learning the hard way that if we bring the care to the individual, we can save so much cost down line. So the bottom line is, I think we're doing everything we can to leverage technology. We're the one service that has to have it. And they all have it, but we have to have it based on just our normal operating standards. And so we're looking very hard at that. So we keep in very close touch. We spend a lot of money, at least till sequestration, when we can't travel anymore. I send everybody by dog sled now to conferences. But we spend a lot of time and effort getting our folks to see what's latest and what's greatest. I will never, ever put myself in a position where I have to apologize to somebody in any of our facilities because the care we give is not as avant-garde as anywhere else in this country.
Sir, this is the last question. We're running out of time, and this is actually a question asked of me to ask of you by the senior veteran at Kaiser Permanente, and it dealt with, as the services have to draw down as we pull out of Afghanistan, number one, will there be corpsmen that will be being released from active duty? And number two, is there a certification process that could allow them to be hired by companies like Kaiser right away?
Going back to the joint question, one of the things that's changed over the last 3 years is we now train all our corpsmen, Air Force medics, Army medics in the same environment in San Antonio. We no longer have our Corps School at Great Lakes. It's now in San Antonio. We train alongside the Air Force medics and the Army medics. That has done a couple things. One, it has created jointness early on, so there's more esprit de corps. But the second thing it's done is allow us to find best practices of the services. The Air Force has always, when they train their corpsmen, they give them a few extra sessions and they come out certified as EMTs. The Navy never did that until we got alongside the Air Force. And then our corpsmen started saying, how come I can't come out as an EMT? So now we're going to do that. So our corpsmen are going to come out with better certifications. We're challenged in the Navy to do things with young enlisted people nobody else does. It's an amazing organization because we send corpsmen out on our smaller ships. Now these ships have 300, 400 people on them. There's no MD there. There's no doctor there. There's no nurse there. There's an independent duty corpsman who has received an above average level of education, who makes decisions every day, every night, that crew thrives on. We haven't fixed it because it hasn't been broken. It's worked well for us. And so I think that we owe them the credit and the due that they've earned through the course of 10 or 11 years of war. I was last night, Tammy, my beautiful wife here, who I married much better than she did. But we went out to an icon here in San Francisco, and I'll close with this. I said, you know, you need to go to the top of the mark and have a drink. And so we went up there. And I don't know if it was the haircut or what, but the waiter was talking to us about being there for many years. And he said, you know, he said, we have a tradition here. And he said, people buy bottles of liquor, and they leave them at the front. And when a soldier or a sailor comes in, we give them a shot because somebody else has bought a bottle of liquor. And he said, the tradition is if you take the last shot in the bottle, you're supposed to buy a new one for the next soldier who came in. He said, would you like a shot? And I said, it's not the last shot, is it? And he said, no. He said, let me pour you some. So he very graciously poured us a little drink, and he showed us the book that they keep, that they ask you to sign at the Mark Hopkins when you do such a thing. And Tammy was flipping through it. She said, look at this. And it was a corpsman who was there on his wedding day. He was in his outfit, and his wife was in a nice outfit, and they'd come up, obviously, for a drink. Maybe they'd had the reception there, I don't know. But what he wrote was, going to leave the Navy now. It's been tough. I've had 5 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've seen things and done things that I don't know that I'll ever be able to speak of. But my heart goes out to those that won't come home. My heart goes out to those that fared worse than I did. Here he is on his wedding day, and he's getting a drink because he's in uniform, and he's writing that down. I don't know how you do any more than that. I don't know how you ask any more of that. When people ask me, and I see so many who have retired, and there's so many in this audience, and God bless you for your service, who have come up to me and told me, I was in the 50s, I was in the 40s, Secretary Shultz. And they say, what about these kids today? You know, what about these young kids who are dialed in, you know, and they got their iPad in one hand and their smartphone in the other hand, and they're listening to this crazy music, and, you know, what do you think? From my perspective, looking at the young men and women who suit up for our country, I've never been so proud. You should never be so proud of these young men and women. They are amazing. They have all the right stuff. They'll put it all on the line. And at the end of the day, when they've been dragged through hell and back, all they really want to know is if their battle buddy or their shipmate is okay. And I was asked one time by a news reporter, a national news reporter who came to Bethesda, was doing a story. He said, are you ever worried that when we blow some of these young kids up, and there's so many kids walking around who have been beaten up and have head injuries and stress, do you ever think that the enemy feels that, you know, America should be worried? My answer was, the first thing these kids want to do when they wake up in my hospital, even if they've been blown to smithereens, is get back in the fight. Who do you think should be worried? So, ladies and gentlemen, I sleep well at night because I know of the young men and women, many of whom you have raised or who have taken their advocacy and their ethos from you. We're going to be okay. And we've got some budgetary issues. We've got some political issues. We've got some global issues that we can't escape from in a globalized world and a globalized economy. But at the end of the day, we're going to be okay because the young people coming up today, they got the watch. They won't let us fail. General Maya, thank you, sir, for the opportunity to speak to this crowd.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Secretary Shultz, for sponsoring this. Big hand now, Admiral Nathan.